Thanks. We're gonna hold my spot.
You guys all ready?
Mhm.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today we are presenting the report and recommendation made by the Vision Zero Task Force. So let me tell you how we got here. In 2017, the Active Living Advisory Committee recommended that we take a look at Vision Zero and how we could implement the principles of Vision Zero here in Omaha. I agreed, and I named a task force to study crash trends, roadway design, and other factors that contribute to fatal and personal injury crashes. Before we go further, I'd like to introduce you to everyone and to thank them. Tom Everson, they're all in the back of the room. Tom Everson is Executive Director for Keep Omaha Alive Drive 25. He's the chairman. He's the Executive Director of Vision Zero, and he's the chairman of Keep Kids Alive. Mike Helgerson, Transportation and Data Manager at MAPPA. Andy Weasel, Douglas County Health Department, Community Health Planner. Pel Duvall from Duvall Consulting. Eric Keepy, for President and CEO of the Nebraska Safety Council of Nebraska. And Rob Reynolds, which is CAR, or Car Allowance for Safer Teen Driving. City representatives on this task force are Derek Miller, who is a Long Range and Mobility Planning Manager, Kevin Carter, who is a Long Range Planning Division, Nick Gordon, Traffic Operation Engineer, Omaha Public Works, Ryan Wiesen, Assistant City Attorney, and Kathy Bossman, Assistant Omaha Fire Chief. Sergeant Jason Menning, Omaha Police Department Traffic Division, and Steve Scarpello, the Omaha City Council Staff Assistant. And most of those members are here today, and I want to thank you all for your hard work, all of you in the back of the room there. So first of all, a little bit of history. Sweden created Vision Zero model in 1997. Vision Zero is based on the principle that traffic deaths and injuries are all preventable. It is a common sense goal that we all should strive for. A growing number of cities in the United States are adopting elements of this model, with the ultimate goal of being the safety on all users of our roads, and eventually the elimination of traffic fatalities and severe injuries. The key findings of the Omaha study include the following. 50% of serious injury and fatal crashes happen on just 6% of our roads. And these crashes have been steadily increasing since 2010, recently surpassing the number of homicides in the city of Omaha. Through last week, Omaha police have investigated 19 crash fatalities, and 115 serious injury crashes just in 2019. Including the homicide just yesterday, we now have 12 homicides for the year in Omaha, so you can see what I'm talking about. In 2018, we had 37 fatalities and 137 serious injury crashes. Of course, Omaha statistics do not include the terrible and tragic crashes this summer that resulted in the death of 4 best friends in Gretna, the 10-year-old in Papillion, the 11-year-old in Blair, and less than 24 hours ago, the 9-year-old in Bellevue. The task force has made thoughtful and appropriate recommendations, and we will evaluate each one of them to determine the effectiveness and the next steps to improve safety of everyone on our roads and ultimately reach the goal of Vision Zero. The recommendations can be summarized in 5 different categories: enforcement and safety, design and construction, legislation, public awareness and education, and data collection. Tom Everson now is going to explain the recommendations. Tom?
Thank you. Before saying anything about the recommendations, I want to acknowledge the members of the task force because, without them, we would not be here today. There is so much expertise and there's so much public service represented by each member of the task force. And hopefully when we get to the question and answer part of our program, you'll be able to hear from them where they'll be able to share some of their more explicit expertise. But in regard to the recommendations, first of all, I just want to note that all the recommendations are first and foremost about actionable steps. They're about doing things. And those things are designed to preserve lives for all who navigate on and around roadways. So we're thinking not just simply of the motorists behind the wheel, passengers in the car. We are thinking about them. But we're thinking about pedestrians, we're thinking about cyclists, we're thinking about children at play as well. So when it comes to enforcement and safety, I'd just like to make 3 points. One is that from an enforcement and safety standpoint, and you heard the statistic about 50% of crashes being on 6% of the roadways, that first of all, in terms of enforcement, it's just targeting high crash and fatality and serious injury hotspots with an eye on prevention of crashes and the preservation of lives. And I always want to come back to the preservation of life. It's about preserving lives. It's not simply about saving lives. If we're in a life-saving situation, that means a tragedy has already occurred. So we really want to focus on prevention. But we can't just enforce our way to better outcomes. It can't simply be, okay, we're going to write tickets, and somehow we're going to manage to alleviate these problems. Because sometimes doubling down on enforcement can cause problems. There may be biases within the community that need to be dealt with. And so as Vision Zero moves forward, one of the questions that will need to be addressed is just a question of equity and how do we engage the whole community in creating and being a part of Vision Zero. From a design and construction standpoint, first of all, creating and recreating infrastructure is designed to minimize the impact of crashes, to prevent and reduce deaths and serious injuries. And part of this is just part of the Complete Streets process, which has been underway for several years here in the city. But speed reduction is always going to be a major part of this. Sometimes it's not reported that speed is the major factor in why a death or a serious injury occurs, but speed is always going to be a factor. There may be fewer pedestrian deaths by somebody hit in a 25-mile-an-hour zone than there is in a 30-mile-an-hour zone. But I don't know about you, I don't want to be hit by either of those cars. So, speed is always a factor. And so in some cases, with implementing design and construction in order to alleviate some of the reasons why people might experience a death or serious injury, is going to be looking at how can we alleviate the potential for that just by the way that infrastructure is designed, with not only the motorist in mind, but again with pedestrians and cyclists and all roadway and roadside users. Legislation. We would recommend supporting introduction and passage of legislation that targets the primary reasons why our family members, friends, classmates, neighbors, and colleagues die in traffic incidents. For example, Nebraska is one of the 15 states that does not have a primary state seatbelt law. We have a secondary law. You have to be pulled over for some other offense in order to receive a ticket for not wearing a seatbelt. And one of the things about seatbelts, and this came out of the data that we looked at just for the city, is that about 60% of fatalities in our city are the result of people not having a seatbelt on. And you would think with 40 or 50 years of education focused on buckling up that that would not be happening, but it still does. And so that's an issue. Having a primary texting or cell phone law. We're a state that, again, has just a secondary texting law. And so, those are laws in other states that have proven to help to reduce the incidence of crashes and serious injuries and fatalities. But a reminder I always like to remind myself is that all good traffic laws are first and foremost about preserving lives. They're about the people that we leave at home when we leave in the morning and that we're coming home to, or who are leaving us and coming home to us as well. It's about people. It's about human beings. Public awareness and education. One of the key components of Vision Zero is really doing a co-branding of all of our efforts, whether it's through the Safety Council, whether it's through MAD, whether it's through Safer Teen Driving, whether it's through driver's ed programs. or whether it's through the initiatives of the organization I run, Keep Kids Alive Drive 25, to combine those and co-brand them as part of Vision Zero Omaha as we move forward. That it's not just what one entity is doing, it's what we're doing together. So a key step forward will be the engagement of many more community partners. The task force in and of itself does not represent all of the entities that need to be involved in going forward. And so that'll be key to involve school districts, neighborhood groups, businesses, and other nonprofits with the eye on creating ownership on the implementation of Vision Zero throughout the whole community. That it's not something that we're simply doing for or at you, but it's something that we're doing with you, and that the community becomes engaged. Because first and foremost, Vision Zero is about working with and through all partners to reduce traffic deaths and serious injuries to zero, which is the only acceptable goal. So since the media is here, I have a note for you. You can help with the educational effort by simply replacing the word accident with the word crash or incident. We have to get away from using the word accident because these are more accurate descriptors, since 94% of traffic deaths are attributed to specific behaviors on the part of motorists, cyclists, passengers, or pedestrians. And so, that could be a favor that you can do the whole community, is to erase the word accident and use the word crash. Data collection. All the Vision Zero recommendations that are being made today are rooted in what the data tells us. The data identifies the behaviors targeted through education or the areas for enforcement or where street design could help mitigate the effects of crashes. All recommendations of the task force have emerged from the data collected and shared through Public Works, through the Omaha Police Department, through Metro Area Planning Agency, MAPA, the Omaha Fire Department, and the State Department of Transportation. So we didn't just pull things out of thin air. The data spoke to us. The data collection will continue to inform and direct the work of Vision Zero going forward. But the data can only tell us so much. There's still unanswered questions, and there are still things that we need to better understand as we move forward. And so data will continue to be a part of that process in informing us what we do from year to year. And certainly in moving towards the goal of zero, there will be changes from year to year based on what the data tells us in a particular year. So I want to turn things back over to Mayor Stothert for the final recommendation.
Okay, why don't you stay right there
Okay,
too.
thank you.
Thank you, Tom. In addition to the recommendations, the task force suggested a Vision Zero coordinator, to develop an action plan, coordinate strategies between the city departments, develop an implementation timeline, and be the liaison with the neighborhood groups, school districts, healthcare providers, and other community stakeholders. The new position is included and funded in the 2020 budget. The task force members will continue to be involved as we begin our development of our action plan. And now we are all available, all the members of the task force, for any of your questions.
Mayor.
I can't see out there today. It's kind of really bright out there. Yes, Jeff.
How do you reach drivers to get across the message to do things like slow down, get your seatbelt on, get off your cell phone? How do you actually reach people and change their behaviors on those?
And Tom, you could come up here too. Get closer to the
certainly.
mics. I was going to say, I think that is our biggest challenge, don't you? It's a behavior change.
Well, behavioral changes are always going to be the biggest challenge, because any one of us could pick a behavior in our own lives that we've tried to change, and we realize how much of a challenge it is in and of itself. And that's, to me, one of the reasons why Vision Zero has to be community-based. It has to engage the community in making this is what Omaha is about. That those changes are not going to happen overnight. But education is going to have to be a consistent thread that runs through everything. Even when infrastructure is changed, people need to learn how to interact with new infrastructure. I mean, you just take traffic circles and some of the challenges that people have with navigating traffic circles when they first go in. It's like you have to learn how to do it. We've probably seen the stories in the news lately about the zipper method of merging, and that seems to be controversial in and of itself, but it's like there are ways to make things safer. Anybody on the committee want to comment on
You
that?
give an example, a lot of Mothers Against Driving too, and how long it has taken with that group to shift behaviors.
Sure. A lot of times we need to look at this as a generational opportunity. That's not real popular because a lot of times people want things to change overnight. But when we do consider Mothers Against Drunk Driving, started I think in 1981, and that's still an issue that we're working on. In fact, it's an issue that came up again and again with the data that we went through with the task force, because drunk drivers are still inordinate and are disproportionately represented in the number of people who are involved in traffic deaths. So, some of these things we've been working on for a long time, but we need to look at, what can we do immediately? What can we do next year? What can we do the next year? It's going to take some time, especially when we're talking about behavioral change.
So is this something that the city will be doing education on itself? Is it the agencies that you mentioned? Is it both?
I think it's both.
Well, and I think, once the coordinator is hired, that person will be responsible for helping to engage all the agencies and businesses and organizations and school districts in the area to be partners in this effort, because it's going to take that kind of effort. It's not simply going to be one department or one person or even a group of people in a department that are going to make this happen. We're going to make this happen.
I've asked the Vision Zero task force for them to determine what the job description of the coordinator will be, and then we will hire that person, and like Tom said, that person will be that liaison between the city and the city departments, as well as the community, the neighborhoods, the hospitals, the schools, and that's why we felt like it was really important to have a coordinator.
Mayor, on the issue of texting while driving, and primary offenses, seatbelts and what have you, the governor has long been opposed to making those primary offenses. Do you think you can convince him otherwise?
Well, the city, myself, and the chief of police have supported these bills, and we continue to support them. But again, it requires a behavior change, and that is a big challenge. Hilkeman had 2 bills. They'll be 39, they'll be 40, I believe, and they still remain in committee. But we will, as part of our goals with the Vision Zero Task Force, we will continue to push that legislation, and we hope we are successful. So it's still out there, and there's a lot of support. There's always been from the city, but now I think we've got a lot more maybe strength behind what we were doing in the past with this group that we have too, this task force, and what they have developed as far as what their goals will be. So yes, I think that there's still a chance that we could get something done.
Have you ever spoken directly with the governor about that?
I haven't spoken directly with him, no, but I've spoke to Senator Hilkeman about it.
Eric, would you want to comment on that? Because I know you're involved with legislation an awful lot, so.
Sure you introduce yourself.
Eric Kepi, President and CEO of the National Safety Council of Nebraska. Our organization, along with a couple others in the state, work very hard on legislation. And we have some very good bills that are in the legislature. They're still in committee. So I think there is an opportunity. I will say that there was a lot of interest from the committee this last year when I did testimony. There was a lot of very good questions, more than we've ever had in the years past. So I think we'll continue to work with the Transportation Committee in the legislature, and eventually we'll need some help from the mayor and maybe some others to convince the governor that that's a necessary thing for roadway safety.
Is there any data that suggests going to primary is going to get more people to wear seatbelts? Or it's like 15% right now that don't wear them, right? Isn't it about 85% that wear them?
For us, it's probably about 85%. But if you take a state like Washington that has a primary
Could you
law,
step in front of the mic?
Yeah. Yeah, if you take a state like Washington that has a primary law, that it's like 95%. Primary laws have been shown to move the needle. And obviously still the education has to happen to get people to engage in that, but they need to be aware that there's an expectation in the first place. And honestly, in Nebraska, our expectations seem to be pretty low. So And we see, because 65% last year, 65% of traffic deaths statewide were people who were unbuckled. Just for the lack of 2 5/8 inches of fabric, there are a lot of people who died who probably would have been alive if they had had that belt buckled.
I want to add one thing on the seatbelt too. What a lot of people aren't aware of is our law does not require people in the back seat to wear a seatbelt. And I think it's very important that not only do we get primary enforcement, but we also get enforcement of backseat passengers. Backseat passengers become projectiles in a car when they are not belted in. When the car stops, the front driver, even the seatbelt on, the backseat passenger does not stop. So I think that's important to add in there. Primary enforcement is important, but we'd also like to get it so all passengers in the car are required to be belted.
How about the distracted driving and the seatbelts? Do you see one as being more realistic to get through in the near future than others?
I will tell you from my time testifying at the legislature that there were a lot more questions about the distracted driving. Statewide, there's about 90% support for primary enforcement with a study that's done every year. And so I think there is some interest there. It's going to be helping move it out of committee and getting some support in the full legislature.
Mayor, this question's for you. What kind of feedback are you getting from your mayor's hotline and social media and things like that, comments from the public on these efforts and the issues that they've been seeing? And then a second part to that as well. Last week you interviewed with my colleague and you told him that you've received 2 complaints so far regarding pedestrian safety and construction zone. Is that correct? In the last 5 years, you said?
I said from our construction division and the public works department, I checked and they have received 2 over the last 5 years. Now, some complaints do come in over omahahotline.com, and the whole reason that we created that is to shorten that process and make it more efficient, so those do not come through our regular hotline. They go directly to the department or the division or wherever that call is about. But yes, that is correct. Now, your first question was, what feedback are we getting? Well, we're doing the press conference today, and we did the press release today. So hopefully we'll hear a lot of feedback about what we're talking about today for the first time after today in the press conference. But we haven't received any comments before the press conference.
Not
This was
regarding
just
Vision
announcing.
Zero, but as far as people calling and talking about safety concerns or anything like that, you haven't had any kind of traffic safety concern calls or emails sent to your office?
Oh, no, we didn't say that at all. I don't know where you got that. I said that what I told your colleague last week is we have received 2 complaints about sidewalks being closed during construction. That's what I said. I never said that we don't get any comments at all about public safety or traffic or concerns on our roads. I never said that. We do.
Can you talk about what kind of comments you've been receiving?
Over the last 6 years?
Sure.
Well, it just depends on what the issue is. Be more specific and I'll give you a specific answer.
Just more of, are you getting an increase in number of people concerned about traffic safety in Omaha? What are they
We're
telling you?
concerned about traffic safety in Omaha, and I think everybody in the city should be. I mean, my first goal and my first responsibility is public safety, and this is definitely part of public safety. So the more people are on our roads, of course, that it's dangerous being out on our roads, and people have to be conscientious and they have to practice safe practices, and this is what this is all about. This is what our active living advisory was about. This is why this Vision Zero task force developed, is because we want people to be safer out on our roads no matter what mode of transportation that they choose. Whether it's automobile accidents, we get calls about people speeding, we get calls about intersections, we get calls about streets needing to be repaired and improved, we get calls about people not following the rules, we get calls about people texting and driving, not wearing their seatbelts, speeding through neighborhoods, not obeying our laws. We get calls about a lot of different things. We have the police department that monitors that all the time. If we have specific areas that need attention, Public Works is sent out there to evaluate that area. So these have been going, I mean, this is just kind of an ongoing issue. So if you want a list of every complaint we've received or every issue over the last 6 years, we'd have to get that to you.
Sure, and that was the response I was looking for.
Okay.
Mayor, where does multimodal transportation investment, like improvement in sidewalks, mobility lanes like bike lanes, support for scooters, other modes of transportation, investment from the city or support from your advisory
Sure.
council?
I'm gonna ask Derek Miller to come up here now too, because we have a complete street policy. I'll let Derek address that, but that definitely goes right with what we are talking about. We're talking about all modes of transportation. You mentioned sidewalks.
Yeah, and sidewalk improvements, widening, making it more accessible,
Yeah.
ADA compliance,
all,
things like that.
You know, with our complete street policy that we have developed, I'm gonna let you speak to it. We are looking at all of those modes of transportation, public safety, whether it be on our streets, whether it be on our sidewalks, whether it be about what mode of transportation that you choose. But Derek, I'll let you answer that a little bit more because you're better at that than me.
Derek Miller, City of Omaha Planning Department. The mayor is correct. Our complete streets policy, which the city council adopted a few years ago, it's about all modes and looking at all modes. And anytime we construct a new project, transportation project, or reconstruct a project, we look at all modes. And once we passed that complete streets policy, we started to develop a complete streets design guideline that's actually in draft form right now. It's available on the Public Works website. That guideline has been utilized on 4 different projects. As of yet, Public Works went through 4 projects with those guidelines and a complete streets checklist to make sure all modes of transportation are incorporated where they can be into our future projects. So I think Complete Streets works hand in hand with the Vision Zero policy to make sure that we are aware that all modes should be included.
Is there a place where you can find those 4 projects, a listing of those 4 projects?
Yeah, we can get those to you.
Wonderful,
Sure.
thank you.
Does the committee have a position on the scooters?
Oh, does the committee have? I'll let Tom. Do you have a?
Well,
come on
we-
up here. Do you have a position
I would
on
say-
scooters?
We made our recommendations prior to the scooters even hitting the streets. So I'm not going to speak for the committee on that. I imagine that each one of us may have our own view on scooters, but the committee, the task force itself has not made a statement about that. We have not addressed that.
Do you have a view?
I said I'm going to be quiet, because I'm not going to, because to me that could come off as representing the task force as a whole, and which I don't think would be fair to the task force.
Keep in mind with the scooters, we are on a 6-month pilot. We don't know if we are going to have them permanently in Omaha. This technology of the scooters that are being piloted now has only been available since 2018. It has not been around that long. And so we really want to evaluate them on our streets, evaluate the safety, how they're being used, etc., before we ever decide. But we think we need a full 6 months. Yes, we have had some injuries, and that is something that we will evaluate. I will say the majority of the injuries that I am aware of have happened with people riding the scooters that are prohibited from riding the scooters, and that is children and youth that are under 18. When you download that app and you go to turn your scooter on, there is a terms of use that you have to agree to every time. It's about 20,000 words long. And I could bet you not many people are reading the whole thing, but one of the things says you have to be 18 years or older. It does say helmets are recommended. It does say you cannot ride on the sidewalk. You have to ride in the street. So there's a lot of things that we are going to look at as we go forward, but we felt like it makes a lot of sense to continue. And not only do I agree that our public works director, our planning director, our police chief, we all, and our city law department all felt we should continue with the scooter to get a full 6 months of data.
Mayor, do you believe streets are for people?
Do I believe streets are for people?
Yes.
Of course, they're for transportation. Yes, they are. For multi-modes of transportation too.
Thank you.
Mayor Stothert.
Why don't you come up here if you want to answer something?
No, I want to ask a question.
Julie,
Okay,
why don't we take the
let's get the
media
media
questions?
questions.
And
Since
from
this is
non-media
a-
members, we can do that
Since
later.
this is a press conference, let's get the media
This might be a
questions.
question for Tom and the mayor. So Sweden started this, had really good ideas, right, 20 plus years ago to get to zero fatalities, I think by next year. Country had 300 plus last year. Is that sobering to you?
Well, I think that, any death is going to be sobering. It's not going to just be sobering to me. It's going to be sobering to that family that has experienced that death, and to the community in which that person lived, whether it's in Sweden or whether it's here. But the thing is that regardless of what that number is, the goal for Vision Zero is always to be working towards that zero. What are the things that we need to do? Because going back to that 94% figure for that behaviors are the primary reason why people die in car crashes, and so behaviorally we have to continue to come back and look at what are the behaviors that are involved in that and how can we address that. I mean, drunk driving continues to be a challenge, and obviously there's been a lot done with that over the last especially 40 years, but it's something that we can't let go of. One of the things that I think Vision Zero does for us is it gives us a focus of where we need to be going and where we want to arrive. And if we ever give that up, then to me, we're just acquiescing and saying, well, yeah, these deaths are okay. We'll accept a certain number of deaths. And Vision Zero really invites us not to to accept that, because there's none of us in this room, at least I would think, without hopefully not projecting too much, would say that there's a member of our family that's expendable. And if there's nobody in our family that's expendable, why should we think that anybody in anybody else's family would be expendable? So to me, we need to do our level best each and every day. And in moving forward, we're formalizing this within our city. That we're taking this on as a city. Again, coming back, fact is not something we're trying to do at you or for you, but it's something that is really going to take the engagement of a whole community in order to reduce the number of deaths.
I asked the question when we were getting this group together, if that goal of zero is an impossible, lofty goal. But to Tom's point, you really can't say that our goal is that there's only 10 deaths or 20 deaths. I mean, the only goal we could have would be 0 deaths. And I think that that's what's really important about it. We have a goal, and I think that's what this group is really going to focus on. But keep in mind, I mean, we have laws on the books now. We have laws against speeding and laws against running a red light and laws against driving while drunk. And people do it, and they do it every day. And so it's difficult to change behaviors, but that's one thing that we are attempting to do to make people more aware. And hopefully one of these days we'll reach that goal, but even one death is one too many.
Where does public transportation investment play a role in this?
Public transportation in Vision Zero?
Yes.
Public transportation is an option that every big and thriving city must have and needs to have, and Omaha is no exception to that. We have an urban core committee right now that has formed out of the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce that is actually looking at all modes of transportation and what we need in our urban area of downtown as far as public transportation. As you know, right now we're beginning construction on the bus stops for our BRT, which is our bus rapid transit, which is only going to expand our current bus system that we have now in Omaha. People tell me all the time, well, nobody rides the bus anyway. It's not true. The ridership is about 3.8 million riderships a year, and we're only going to make it better with what we do with the BRT. And as we continue to do that, as Derek said with the complete streets, we look at all modes of transportation, and we want all modes of transportation to be safe. And so we continue to look at public transportation options. We always do.
Mike, would you want to speak to that at all? Okay, sorry.
Okay, Derek, did you want to say anything else about
The only thing I'd say is public transportation is safer than most modes. We have data that proves riding public transportation, transit is safer. And as far as the complete streets and our street design, we are every project we look at, we make sure when we reconstruct a street, build a new street, if transit is available, if transit has a dedicated route on that street, that those connections are strong, those pedestrian connections are strong to that bus stop and other locations. And with the BRT, we looked at the new transit stations and pedestrian connectivity. Both planning and public works did that. So it's on top of mind that we have strong pedestrian connections to transit. And what I said earlier, public transit is safer. We have data that proves that.
Other questions? No?
Can I ask my question?
Do you wanna ask it to the mayor?
I do. First of all, thank you. This is very important, and I'm glad that the city of Omaha is taking a step for Vision Zero. It's what progressive cities are doing, so thank you very much for doing this. I just wondered if you could elaborate a little bit more about the position that's going to be in the 2020 budget, and will there be additional implementation dollars in your budget dedicated towards this priority?
Well, it is in the budget. It's in the 2020 budget that was just approved by the city council, so that position is already in. But like I said before, we're gonna ask the task force to help develop that job description, and then we will hire for that position. So, I don't know if you wanna say anything else, what you guys feel about that position,
Well,
as you,
I mean, I will say some of the things that we have talked about, because we really look at it as being a position that is going to take some specific skills that involve community engagement, being able to bring disparate groups together to work together for a common goal. And so, you know, the person hopefully has some transportation background and all, but specifically those people skills are probably going to be more front and center in terms of bringing people together in order to move the goal forward. So that's probably as much as I could say today, unless somebody else on our task force would want to say something, because we'll have to meet and accept the mayor's directive to give some input.
any more questions? All right, I think you've got some information that Carrie handed out to all of you that puts about everything we said in print today. So thank you all for coming, we appreciate it.